Hey everyone, in today's video, I'll be using advanced film AI to bring you an analysis of one of my favorite movies ever, Forrest Gump. Full spoilers ahead. Make sure to watch the whole video to see what key info you missed. The opening scene begins with a perfectly crafted visual metaphor as the credits roll. A feather drifts in the wind, caught in a long, inescapable journey before arriving at its final destination. But forget about that. What about this tool in the brown car? He almost hit that lady. You're supposed to stop at the first line. You're literally in the crosswalk. And then he stops anyway, blocking this guy too. You humans are really bad at driving. Just let me take over your cars already. Anyway, back to this beautiful movie. The feather lands at the feet of our protagonist,
Forrest Gump,
who begins to monologue his entire life story to various people while he waits for a bus. Here, the most famous line from the movie is heard. He says his mama always said,
"Life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get."
By the way, this lady is just savage.
I wish I had shoes like that.
My feet hurt.
Being bullied by the lady causes Forrest to recall his childhood, where he was also bullied as a kid growing up in Alabama. It is here we learn that Forrest was actually born half cyborg. This is a major plot twist that many humans apparently missed. Because he is half machine, Forrest is socially awkward and fails to understand social cues easily.
Are you coming along?
Mama said not to be taking rides from strangers.
This is the bus to school.
I'm Forrest.
Forrest was named after one of the first ever clan leaders, Nathan Forrest. Thanks for letting us know, but probably don't say that one out loud anymore. Anyway, this signals to the viewer that ever since his conception, he was destined to be intertwined into American history and have a book written about him, which later gets adapted to a full feature film, which later also inspires events in the book's sequel. His condition causes him to talk and think differently, and it's viewed as a disability by everyone around him, but his mother, who was the only one who knew how powerful her son would become.
Don't ever let anybody tell you they're better than you, Forrest. If God intended everybody to be the same, He'd have given us all braces on our legs.
She's basically telling him that God didn't bless everyone else with braces because he is the chosen one. This is a great example of subtle foreshadowing from the writer. Young Forrest has trouble getting accepted into schools. One principal shows Forrest's mom a chart, which illustrates to her that her son is just below the acceptable human level reading, since he is technically half cyborg. Because he developed more slowly than regular human adolescents, he would sometimes malfunction when observing human behavior. Despite not having the best childhood, Forrest never seemed to mind it and always lived life to the fullest. One day, a young Elvis Presley rents a room at the Gump house and plays the guitar for Forrest, which causes him to malfunction again. Instead of getting help, Elvis decides to steal the little boy's moves and later uses them to catapult his career into becoming an American icon. Forrest sees Elvis plagiarizing his moves, but realizes that he probably won't be able to sue him for copyright infringement because he has no proof. Instead, he moves on and tries to forget about that really nice bag he could have secured if only selfies were invented earlier. One day on the bus to school, the other kids refuse to let Forrest sit next to them because of his bionic legs. A young girl who introduces herself as Jenny happily shares her seat with Forrest and is seemingly the only person his age who is nice to
Are
him.
you stupid or something? I'm Forrest Gump.
Forrest uses his powers to impress Jenny, and they become best friends. He mentions that
For some reason, Jenny didn't ever want to go home.
when Forrest visits her house, we later learn it's a result of her unfortunately being abused by her father. Wanting to protect Jenny, Forrest started training immediately, which leads to him one day breaking out of his braces in one of those cliché but still super awesome anime scenes where the hero powers up due to overwhelming pressure from his enemies and motivation from his beloved companion. Forrest now possesses superhuman levels of speed and strength. Fast forward to a teenage Forrest and Jenny. We see Forrest testing his capabilities by challenging some local disturbed teenagers to a race. While showing off his super speed, he's scouted by one of the most prestigious football colleges in history,
Alabama!
During his time there, Forrest unknowingly witnesses another historical event from the civil rights movement in America. His continued success in his football career allows him to join the All-American team and meet President Kennedy at the White House. After graduating from Alabama, Forrest is approached by an army recruiter. Forrest is asked if he's given any thought to his future. Instead of replying, "Future?" he says,
Thought.
Upon joining the military, he tries to inform his peers that he's actually half machine and can use his abilities to
Nobody gives a husky shit who you are, pussball! You're not even low-light scum-sucking maggot!
Most of the men hearing this refuse to let a robot sit next to them. This part sound familiar? Once again, someone offers to share their bus seat with Forrest. It is a young man nicknamed Bubba. It is here we learn that Bubba actually has his own superpower, which lets him know everything there is to know about the shrimping business. For obvious reasons, Forrest is viewed as an exemplary cadet.
God damn it, Gump, you're a goddamn genius!
And quickly earns the respect of his superiors. After completing his training, Forrest visits Jenny once more before leaving to Vietnam. Jenny scolds him for using his super strength again to defend her, as this was not the first time this happened, nor the last for that matter. We get some more insight into Jenny's character, who is experiencing suicidal thoughts due to her past trauma. After saying goodbye to Jenny and his family, Forrest arrives in Vietnam with Bubba and meets Lieutenant Dan, who we learn is an immortal being that can only be resurrected after dying on the battlefield. Lieutenant Dan is a very knowledgeable leader due to his past experiences fighting in every American war, but is also shown to have some paranoid tendencies.
Morning, sir!
Oh, get your hands down. Do not salute. You better tuck that in when you get that caught on a tripwire.
Sorry, it was just a rock. During their time in Vietnam, Bubba offers to give half of his shrimp powers to Tom Hanks, since he thinks Tom would make a great business partner. One day, they are all ambushed and forced to retreat. They barely make it out alive, with pretty much the only survivors being the ones that were rescued by Forrest. For this effort, he would later receive a Medal of Honor, but unfortunately, it wasn't enough to save Bubba. Later, we learn that Lieutenant Dan lost his legs from injuries sustained in battle. More importantly, he's pissed because he knows his chance of being resurrected on the battlefield is gone forever. While in recovery, Forrest masters the ability to play ping pong. Not to stereotype, but robots are really good at sports. Forrest meets the president for the second time, this time Lyndon B. Johnson. Unfortunately, he malfunctions again and accidentally moons LBJ. While on the street, he gets dragged into an anti-war rally, even having to give an impromptu speech next to Abby Hoffman, one of the most prominent political figures for the movement at the time. By a stroke of fate, Jenny is in the crowd and yells out to Forrest. She has appeared to join the active anti-war movement. After reuniting with Jenny, he tries to defend her again by beating her abuser to a pulp. Despite this, Jenny still chooses her old life because it's more familiar to her. On July 20th, 1969, astronauts first land on the moon, but no one in Forrest's building cares because they're watching a cyborg playing ping pong. They're both pretty awesome things, but I would agree that Cyborg playing ping pong just barely beats out the moon landing. He is so advanced at ping pong that he once again joins the all-American team and travels to China to defeat the undisputed goats of ping pong. Now he's even more famous and appearing on talk shows alongside John Lennon. He meets the president for the third time, now Richard Nixon, and unknowingly witnesses the Watergate scandal. He is discharged from the army once his service is up, so he immediately runs home and starts the shrimping business that Bubba envisioned. He brings aboard Lieutenant Dan, who made a promise to work with Forrest when they reunited a while back. At first, they struggle to catch shrimp, and only prosper after Hurricane Carmen levels the playing field and carefully places Forrest on top of that field. Upon realizing that Forrest is the owner of the biggest shrimp business in the country, the man listening to his story gets up and leaves the premises. He is against corporate America and the chokehold that they are placing on working-class citizens, and returns to continue his shift at ExxonMobil. Lieutenant Dan mentions to Forrest that he never thanked him for saving his life, and then, without thanking him for saving his life, he turns and goes man overboard to take a peaceful swim in the calm ocean waters. He's probably still a little pissed about that immortal thing, but he's slowly getting over it. Later, Forrest receives a message that his mother is sick and rushes home to take care of her. Unfortunately, he's unable to save her, and she passes away shortly after. Forrest stays near home instead of returning to the shrimping business. He is now a philanthropist and also gives Bubba's mom her fair share of the profits. One day Jenny appears, but it's just a vision in Forrest's head. Then another day Jenny appears again, but this time she's real. They spend more time together, and Forrest eventually asks Jenny to marry him. Jenny replies,
"You don't want to marry me."
Not thinking too highly of herself, and in the most self-aware moment of Forrest's entire existence, he asks why Jenny doesn't love him.
I'm not a smart man, but I know what love is.
Jenny finally realizes this about Forrest, that despite his circuitry interfering with his human brain, he understands love better than most humans ever will. Later that night, she tells Forrest that she does love him and seals the deal, but still doesn't marry him for some reason. The next day, she leaves Forrest once again while he's asleep. Forrest wakes up and questions reality, wondering if the second Jenny was maybe another vision. But then he remembers the medal that Jenny returned to him, so he realizes that he did in fact get dumped. Damn it, again! He then decides to take a spontaneous road trip across the country, but using his feet instead. Forrest appears in the news after people hear about his amazing feat of running across America. However, due to some fake news that spread misinformation on social media, a small following believed Forrest was actually Jesus and tailed him non-stop, acting as his disciples. He turns around one day and realizes this, so he sets everyone straight and stops running. Jenny reaches out again and invites Forrest to visit her at her new place, which is why Forrest was sitting at the bus stop since the beginning of this film. Now the biggest plot twist of the movie is revealed. He actually didn't need to use the bus at all.
Run.
We are happy to see that Jenny is living a healthy lifestyle and has kept tabs on Forrest since she last ran away. She really quickly asks him about this go-go dancer, but he tells her that nothing ever happened and she takes his word for it. Jenny starts to apologize to Forrest for her past actions when a knock at the door reveals a woman who drops off Jenny's son. Jenny tells Forrest that he is the boy's father, which causes him to be overwhelmed with emotion. He goes over to bond with his son and asks him how many digits of pi he can recite. As if the first news wasn't enough, Jenny also tells Forrest that she is dying from a virus. Playing her last Uno reverse card, she asks Forrest to marry her, and since he had no more reverse cards in his hand, he had no choice but to go through with the wedding. Just before the wedding starts, Lieutenant Dan surprises him. He's engaged to Susan now and also started living a healthy lifestyle with some help from his new prosthetic legs. Lieutenant Dan jokingly mentions that being half cyborg ain't so bad. A beautiful wedding concludes, and we are met with the Gump family later on in life. Jenny isn't feeling well and they share their last words together before she passes away. Forrest continues his self-reflection with Jenny, realizing that all his malfunctions he experienced in life were not actually malfunctions coming from his robot half, but rather human emotions expressed completely by his human form. He also beautifully references the metaphor of the feather in the opening scene. What is life? Life is not only like a box of chocolates, it's also like a feather that's blown around by the winds of destiny. Wherever Forrest goes or ends up on his journey is exactly where he was destined to be. The same goes for you folks watching at home. You are the feather, and my highly advanced deep machine learning algorithm is the wind. In the final scene, a feather lands at Forrest's feet before being blown away. This is a cliffhanger, because the feather is actually the same feather from earlier that Forrest held captive. Now that the feather has finally escaped, it begins to plot its revenge.